While reflecting on today's reading, I recall what I had learned during my training, studies about historical and literary criticism. Often, we were reminded by Reverend Dr. John Salmon to remain true to the text and let the text speak for itself. Maintain the integrity and honesty, he reminds us. This morning, I'm deconstructing John 21 1 to 19 and let the text speak for itself in its own historical context. What intrigues me is the dialogue between Jesus and Peter. Do you love me, Peter? Tend my sheep. Do you love me, Peter? Tend my sheep. Do you love me, Peter? Then feed my sheep. If someone were to ask me to do something repeatedly over and over again, I may develop the feeling of distrust. I read a story about two guys who were very good friends, the best of friends. And one day they were walking along the seashore when they started to argue. The argument became so heated that John slapped Martin, not his real name of course, across the face. Martin didn't retaliate. Instead, he took a stick and wrote in the sand, "Today John slapped me." They went off to the pub, and over a few pints they made up. A few days later, they went for a swim in the sea. Martin's foot became entangled in some seaweed, and he couldn't free himself. The sea was becoming rougher, and Martin began to panic. "Help!" he cried. "I'm drowning. Please help me." John, who was a particularly strong swimmer, heard his friend's cries for help and swam over to him. John disentangled Martin's foot and then pulled his half-drowned friend safely back to the shore. When he had recovered, the grateful Martin found a hammer and a chisel and carved into a rock, "Today John saved my life." John was bewildered, and so he says to Martin, "After I struck you, you wrote about it on the sand, but today you chisel words on a rock. Why?" Says Martin to John, "When someone hurts you, we should record it on sand, where the winds of forgiveness can erase it. But when someone does something good for us, it should be recorded on rock, from which it can never be removed. Forgive. Let the winds of forgiveness erase the sins of the past." Perhaps sometimes we may find it hard to forgive and forget. We are pretty good at holding on to our hurts. As for forgiving, well, we know we really ought to forgive. After all, if Jesus can forgive Peter, we ought to follow Jesus and do our best to forgive those who hurt us. Let the sands of time wash away the hurt and focus on the good stuff. Just forgive and forget. Forgive and forget. Not that easy. I can still remember while growing up my mom insisting that I say sorry. I don't know how many times I was coerced into telling my siblings that I was sorry, or how many times they were coerced into saying sorry. I could still recall all the horrible things we did to each other when we were kids. We haven't forgotten them, and it always surfaces during family gatherings. And as I moved on in life, I haven't forgotten the hurts others have inflicted on me along the way. I can still feel the pain of betrayal, intimidation, and bullying. Nor have I forgotten the pain that I have inflicted on others. Once upon a time, I was taught to believe that forgiveness was something we simply had to do as Christians. Better forgive them or else. Forgive and forget if you love me. You'll be just like Jesus, who loved Peter so much that he forgave him the unforgivable betrayal. Once, twice, 3 times, Peter denied Jesus. Jesus forgives Peter. Wait a minute. Does Jesus forgive Peter? Does he? The text does not indicate that Jesus forgave Peter. Neither does the text indicate that Peter begged for forgiveness. We have heard this story so many times that we assume Jesus forgives Peter the unforgivable. If you want to follow Jesus, you too will forget about it, and move on. And while saying we are sorry is as good a place as any to begin the healing process, there are times when the pain of our betrayal, the pain of our hurts is too deep for us to bear, and the very act of saying that we are sorry is beyond our reach. There are also times when, if asked to accept an apology, the pain is too deep, so raw that we cannot even entertain the idea of accepting an apology. Forgiveness is not the end all and be all of healing. Healing is a complex process that takes all sorts of shapes and forms, and also time. If we let Easter resurrection story touch us, we may not be surprised that Peter never asks Jesus to forgive him, but it may shock us to hear that in this story, Jesus may not actually forgive Peter. And as for forgetting, well, just listen to what Jesus says. Simon, the son of John, not Simon Peter, not Simon Peter, Peter the rock, but Simon, the son of John, a simple fisherman. Do you love me more than these? Sure, says Peter. You know that I'm your friend. Are you kidding me? How can Peter expect anyone to believe that he is a friend? With friends like Peter, who needs enemies? Peter ought to be on his knees begging Jesus for forgiveness. Once more, I assume that Peter is in denial. You know that I'm your friend. Prove it, says Jesus. Feed my lambs. Do you love me? Again, Peter just can't help himself. Yes, Rabbi, you know that I'm your friend. Again, Jesus responds, tend my sheep. Do something. Prove it if you are my friend. Simon, son of John, do you love me as a friend would? Peter is hurt because Jesus asked a 3rd time, and so Peter goes on the defensive. You know everything, don't you, Rabbi? You know that I am your friend. Prove it. Jesus drives home his point. Feed my sheep. Follow me. The hurt hasn't gone away. The struggle continues. 2 friends locked in a wrestling match of their own, struggling to find reconciliation. The work of forgiveness is always ongoing. I believe that Jesus of Nazareth embodied a new way of being in the world. Faced with the pain and hurt of life under an oppressive regime, Jesus could have taken up arms or demanded retribution. But he chooses a different way, a different path, a way of being that embodies love. Do you love me, Simon Ben John? You can begin by caring for those I care for. You can begin by feeding those I love. You can begin by loving. The healing will begin not by forgiving. Forgiveness will come out of the love we share for one another. In that love, we may never forget. We may not forget the pain and the hurts. In our pain, we shall seek to embody love. Imperfect, struggling, unconditional love. The stories which have been handed down to us about Jesus illustrates that love. I am not saying that forgiveness is not an important and precious gift which has the power to change lives. I'm just saying that forgiveness is not the be-all and end-all that it has been portrayed to be. Jesus may have forgotten Peter's denial, Peter's betrayal. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? I leave that conclusion to you. The response is yes, yes, yes. Then feed my lambs. Care for those I care for. Love those I love. For in loving them, you love me. Love is the be-all and end-all. Forgiveness is not the end we seek. Forgiveness is a byproduct of the work of love. Love that was embodied in Jesus and continues to live in, with, through, and beyond us. Love that lies at the heart of reality. Love that permeates life. Years ago, when I was a minister at the Fielding Methodist Church, an incident happened that shook the community. A young farmer was murdered, and it was discovered that the perpetrator was his own brother-in-law. And finally, his brother-in-law was sentenced for the crime that he had done. This young farmer's grandparents were members of my parish. And many times we talk about the hurts, the pains, we talked about forgiveness. And the response from the grandparents were, I cannot forgive right now. I just don't have the strength. And on the day that I was about to leave Fielding for another appointment, the grandparents came up to me and said, Philo, we are getting there. We are getting there. Forgiveness is not the end we seek. Forgiveness is a byproduct of the work of love. Love that was embodied in Jesus and continues to live in, with, through, and beyond us. Love that lies at the heart of reality. Love that permeates life. Amen. And perhaps during our coffee break, we can discuss about forgiving and forgetting. We might have our own experience. We might have a formula that we use to forgive one another. And let us share that formula perhaps we have. Or if it's difficult to forgive, then let us be honest and say, yes, there were times that I was not able to forgive. I struggle to forgive. I struggle to forgive the abuse that's inflicted on children. I struggle to forgive people who inflict pain on animals, the voiceless. I struggle to forgive those who exploit the vulnerable, especially the refugees. I struggle to forgive those who intimidate and bully people to a breaking point. Forgive and forget. Is it easy? Thank you for listening.